it so hard for people to quit their job? If you left today, your company would move on without you. We are heading into a new decade, a new season for you to evaluate your career and take the steps needed to advance strategically. And it all starts with determining whether you should quit your job. This is one episode of a 10-part series called Should I Quit My Job that will take you through evaluating yourself, managing external impacts on your career, evaluating your current reality, and creating a plan to move forward. My name is Julia, and I am the career strategist behind the Ride the Tide Collective podcast, where we equip ambitious professionals to strategize and take action to advance their career. Welcome, everyone. We are on the last episode of season 1, and I am sad to see it go. The question of should I quit my job was the driver for starting this podcast, and I have loved being able to share my experience and tips with you. This was a question that I not only wrestled with multiple times in my career journey, but I've also been asked so many times by previous clients. And that's why this episode is all about your questions. This topic is obviously very personal, and there are a lot of nuances to answering it for yourself. While I've provided an overview and some specific actions to get started, there are a lot more items that could have been addressed, hence the Q&A episode. Thank you to those who submitted questions. I'm not going to attach names to these questions because I believe our career challenges should be kept private, and I want to respect my listeners' privacy. So let's get on with it. The first question that I got was about management, and specifically the question was, how do I know if I'm cut out for management? And I loved that somebody asked this question because, as you've heard me say in the podcast, not everyone is cut out for management. And a lot of times people get into management roles and they freak out because they don't know what to do. Before you get to that place, you need to recognize that management is not the only way to move up or be successful in your career, but it might be the best way within your industry. So you want to understand what that looks like for where you're at in the career that you've chosen. So one of my biggest tips is to talk to people who are in management, specifically within your company. But if you don't feel comfortable talking to somebody in your company, then try to find somebody in another industry that's in management and just talk about their journey and what their challenges are, the wins that they've had, and just what a day is like in their life. What I have found is that most people don't really understand the challenges that managers face until they're in the role. So being able to talk to somebody who can articulate that for you is really helpful early on. And you have to remember, different industries have different standards for management. So again, you want to have a really good understanding of what that role is going to look like. In some cases, you're a manager, but you're more project managing and managing work day to day and creating schedules and all of that. In other cases, it's more people management. You want to have a really good understanding of the expectation in your industry. And of course, one thing I always say, you need to know yourself and your strengths. I believe everybody can learn to be a manager. I think you can learn how to really do anything, but you need to know yourself and you need to know where you feel comfortable. And not everybody wants to go in and do that work. Not everybody wants to be the bad guy, which sometimes when you get into management, you can become. One thing to remember too is you don't have to be a people person to be a manager, but you have to be willing to understand how to work with people and manage them well. So a lot of times people get into management and think, oh, I'm the boss now. I'm going to tell everybody what to do. Nope, you're the boss now, and you need to understand your people and how they work and make sure that they are happy so that they continue to work and be productive at the highest level, because their performance is now your responsibility. One of my last tips around this is reading management books and taking a few courses or trainings. This can happen a lot of different ways. Obviously, you can read a book. And management books are a little bit different than leadership books. So you want to make sure that you read the synopsis or you read the chapter headings to have an understanding of what that book is really saying and make sure that it's going to answer your questions. And then also with courses and trainings, sometimes companies will have courses that you can take. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then look at your professional associations or sometimes just a Coursera and this isn't an ad for that specific platform, but that type of platform, an online platform where you can learn different management techniques and have a pretty good understanding of what that looks like. The next question is, tell me about recommendations. Who do you ask and does it matter? The simple answer is yes, it does matter. And then who do you ask? So you want to ask people who can speak to the main skills of the job that you're applying for, or people who have a connection to that organization or industry. Honestly, as somebody who has been a reference for others and who has needed references, one of the most courteous things that you can do is over prepare your references. And I think this is something that is really overlooked in the whole job application process. My recommendation and what I have done in the past is I will send my references a copy of the job description. I will send them the resume and cover letter that I used to apply. And then in the email that I send them, I will let them know if there's something specific that I want them to address based on their relationship with me. So that could be a specific project that I worked on for them or a trait that I have that I know they can speak to well. As somebody who has been a reference, this is so helpful to have this information because it sets you up for success, honestly, because the more information I have, the easier it's going to be for me to share it and share it well, especially if you haven't worked for that person for a little bit. Like if it's been over a year since you've worked for that person, then they're going to need a refresher. So you definitely want to set them up for success. This is also why you should not apply to hundreds and hundreds of jobs, which I know you've heard me say before. Your references won't be able to keep up. And honestly, for you also, and I'm not going to go into all the reasons why, but you just do not want to be applying for hundreds of positions. You want to be really specific when you do that. And this is one of those off reasons of why, because it's an implication of I don't want to be getting 30 or 40 requests for recommendations from you because you applied to so many different positions. That's really not a good use of my time. You also want to think about the order that you put them in the application or on a reference sheet. Whoever you put first needs to be the most relevant because they are going to be the first person called. And then obviously down from that would be the level of importance for that position. And I will switch those around depending on the position that I'm applying for and their relevance to that position or to that company or that industry. So you want to think about those little nuances, but really great question. This was something I didn't go into because I didn't really go super deep in the last episode around job search, but this is a really great one to ask. So thank you to the person that asked that. Okay, this next question I thought was actually really great. And I think we assume that people know how to do this. And so when I got asked the question, I was like, oh, thank you so much. This is really great. So the question is, what is the best way to resign? Especially if you are frustrated or annoyed with your manager. When do you submit the resignation letter, exit interview, etc.? And basically, how do you keep it all professional? Such a good question. Such a good question. First of all, you need to check your employee handbook for policies. Most companies, especially larger companies, will have a policy around how to resign. A lot of times it will include, sometimes they want a formal letter, but these days an email will usually do. And so you want to send an email. I have done both, depending on the policy. But I will always send an email, and if they do require a full letter, I'll say, I've left a letter or I have the physical letter for you. But in the email, I will send it to my boss. I will copy HR, whoever the appropriate person in HR is, And then depending on your structure, I will copy the person above my boss. So whoever, oversees that department as a whole. So you just have to have a pulse on that. And in some cases, it might not be anybody. It might just be your boss. You want to give at least 2 weeks notice. That is standard practice. It can change depending on your relationship with your job, with your company. This specific question is when you're frustrated or annoyed. If that's the case, then definitely stick to that 2-week window. If you have a better relationship, sometimes people will give more notice. I've done that before as a courtesy to my employer, but it's not required. 2 weeks is the standard. And sometimes the company will be like, leave, just leave. And we don't want to see you anymore. And that's the way it is. And that's fine. In some cases, if you're in a really toxic environment, you might not give the 2 weeks. You might just leave. That's up to you and the relationship that you have. But I would also think about do not resign until you have a signed letter that you're going to be employed somewhere else. That's a really big thing that you want to have before you submit that resignation letter. In terms of the exit interview, in my experience, HR usually schedules an exit interview, but I've also seen it where HR is completely hands-off or they send you a questionnaire. So it really just depends on the size of the company and the policy. In some cases, your boss might also schedule an exit interview for you. If you have a tumultuous relationship with your boss, then you want to keep that exit interview just as simple as possible. Do not get emotional. Do not go into crazy elaborate stories. Just answer their questions and keep it short and keep it to the point. If you believe that you can provide valuable feedback that's not going to hurt your reputation, then go ahead and do that. One of the things that I realized in an exit interview that I did, they asked a lot of really great questions in a questionnaire before I met with HR. And I was able to really think about why I was leaving and provide constructive criticism around the systems that were in place at that organization. And it was just a really great opportunity for me to get my thoughts really clear around why I was leaving. So be honest about why you're leaving, but in a way that is comfortable for you. And obviously, I hope I don't have to say this, but I'm going to. Don't badmouth or gossip. If you don't have a questionnaire that's provided, just spend some time writing down your thoughts if necessary to make sure that you're approaching this situation with a level head. How do I know if I need a career coach or therapy? I loved this question also. Fun fact, I'm going to love all the questions because I love questions. This one in particular, though, I thought was really great to ask, and I'm very glad that somebody asked it. So this is actually a really touchy subject because some people are really uncomfortable recommending people to go to therapy. You just want to be mindful of that. The other thing you want to be mindful of is career coaches, unless they have a license, they are not therapists. And so I get really leery of people who are out there dealing with their clients' personal issues that really need to be done by a therapist. You want to make sure that whoever your career coach is, they are not trying to diagnose you because that's not their role unless they're licensed, and you'll know if they're licensed. As a career coach, and in my experience, I will let you know if there is a topic I don't feel I'm qualified to answer or manage. For example, I've had clients where I have picked out major issues, like I can see signs of depression, I can see signs of anxiety, but I can't diagnose them. So I will not sit there and say, I think you're depressed, I think you have anxiety. What I will say is, hey, you are exhibiting some behaviors that I think you might want to talk to a therapist about. Is that something that you have considered? Right? So I'm not going to diagnose you, but I'm going to have a discussion around options for you to dig deeper into things that you've shared with me. One thing to know is some therapists will do a little bit of career coaching as part of their practice, and usually they will talk about this up front. There are therapists that specifically work with people who have anxiety and depression around work, but this is very rare and very specific. So if you want that, you can search that type of therapist out. Similarly, most career coaches are not licensed therapists, so we're not going to diagnose or take you through those processes. Because of my counseling degree, I have the ability to identify when you need additional help, especially in the form of therapy. And like I said, I will suggest it when it's appropriate. I don't really like my job, but I have to stay. There aren't opportunities for growth. What should I do? This is a great question, and I've actually had quite a few clients that come to me and say this, and usually I will push back immediately on this question and dig into why you think that you need to stay. That's a question that I'm going to throw back at you first. And just for the context, because I don't have anybody to answer what the context is, what I have seen is sometimes if there is a family business situation, or if you're in a situation where there's a benefit to you staying in that particular position or organization in long term, that's usually where I hear this type of question the most. People who work in government positions will usually say this because they might not like the work that they do, but they get a pension, and so they want to stay for that. Similarly, in a family business, a lot of people in family business feel like they can't get out because they have to be there for the family, or there will be repercussions, right? Honestly, I don't think that that's true. And usually when I hear someone say that they can't leave a position, what I'm hearing is, I'm not willing to deal with the fallout of leaving this position, and I'd rather be miserable than stand up for myself. I'm just going to leave that there for you to ponder if this is your situation. But on the practical side, if you really feel like you can't leave, what I would do is look into volunteer opportunities in your community as a way to gain skills that you want to grow in, and also potentially obtain leadership positions, which will help in that growth phase for you. Similarly, look into professional associations in your field or industry. There are always really great opportunities for growth in terms of skill building again, as well as leadership. Okay, next question. Do you have any advice on explaining a career switch to your significant other or family, especially when they think you're crazy? Well, this is a fun question. So first of all, if you have a significant other who doesn't support you, this is a red flag for me. I would really get to the root of what is bothering them and be really open to hearing what they have to say, but also try to dig out what is really going on. If it's for selfish reasons, then you have the ability to acknowledge their concerns and validate them, but also explain why this change is going to be best for you. And hopefully they'll support you in the end. I mean, if they're your spouse, I hope that they would do that. But if they don't, then again, you got to keep digging in until you figure out what that middle ground is going to be for both of you. If it's family, honestly, does it really matter what they think? I've worked with so many people who have followed the advice of their parents or family members when it came to their career, and now they're miserable. It's because the advice that these people give to you is really about them. It's their worldview, their experience, their skills. It's not as much about you. It can be, but it rarely is. And so while your family means well, you really need to make career decisions based on who you are, your values, and your goals. And guess what? Those might be different from your parents or your family. But at the end of the day, you are the one that has to go to work each day. You are the one that has to walk into that office or that environment, and you have to be happy. Our last question, and this is one that was one of my favorites. It's part of why I left it to the end. I know I can do more with my career, but I have a family and time feels scarce. How do I balance time with my family and moving forward in my career? This is such a popular topic with working parents. And I don't remember if this was a woman or a man that submitted this, but honestly, it really doesn't matter. It could be either one. And my advice is going to be for both anyway. But the desire to grow and to do more in your career, but also feeling guilty about leaving your family or not spending enough time with your family, this is something that I hear and read about a lot. So I know this is a really hot topic. This is all about seasons, expectations, and communication. And here's what I mean. Career growth happens in seasons. You might need a few months where you have to go to events after work or once a week, or spend a few hours on the weekends researching and calling people to network and find the next position. That's a season. That's not going to be forever. But in order to do those things, you must set expectations with your spouse and your family about what you need. And then you need to stay in communication about your goals and progress. Where these types of things break down is when we don't communicate what is happening. And that's what I have seen is people have these amazing career goals, but they don't share them. They don't talk about them with their family, and they don't talk about the progress, good or bad, right? So if you go to an event during the week, spending time talking to your spouse or your family, depending on how old your kids are, that is a really great way for them to understand, mom or dad, they're doing something. They were out there, they put themselves out there to get ahead in their career. And so I think when they get that communication, it makes it easier for them to digest and understand what's going on, and they'll be more forgiving of you not being there. It's all about the season, it's all about expectations, and it's all about communication. Well, there you have it. This is the close of season 1 of the Ride the Tide Collective podcast. If you like what you hear or what you have heard throughout this entire season, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating or review. I actually go in and read these. You can also follow Ride the Tide Collective on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook.